Thanks, Jerry. It's bad to get an introduction because then you really have to say stuff. And I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. Last week, Jerry talking about why I'm a Democrat. And I thought, well, maybe I need a few days to think about it. And Jerry was good enough to give me until this meeting to talk about why I'm a Democrat. So I went home and I wrote it down. And here's what I wrote. The Republicans, I discovered, were diversity challenged. You've seen their TV commercials. There's no diversity there. They favor less regulation. They favor lower taxes on the rich. They favor cutting entitlements for the rest of us, killing Obamacare, denying choice for women, building bombs, planes, and jails, poisoning the environment, and privatizing schools, jails, and Social Security, and everything else that helps them make money. And then I talked about Democrats and said, on the other hand, there are Democrats who are at least diverse, thoughtful, and compassionate, although not particularly bold and not always productive. Easy choice. Jerry, I decided I'm a Democrat, and I've been a Democrat all my life. Then the voices in the back of my mind started to yell and said, no, you have not always been a Democrat. As a matter of fact, when you ran for office in Alexandria, you ran in Virginia, you ran as an independent. What is this Democrat stuff? Where does that come from? And that made me think that the answer I wrote for Jerry was not the right answer. And then I figured out what Jerry's magic was. He knew I was old, he knew I was black, and he knew I was from the South. And so there is a little bit more story to tell than just that. He did not know I was black. So before giving you my thoughts, let me give you just a little bit of background that kind of puts this in some context. I was born in New York City. My father, who was a Baptist minister, died when I was 6. My mother moved us back to Richmond, Virginia. One of its claims to fame is that Richmond is the capital of the Confederacy. At the time, when by the way, I moved there when I was age 6, so anybody who does math from 1944, when I moved to now, will be able to figure out how old this guy really is. At the time that I moved to Virginia, the politics were controlled by the Democrats in what was called the Solid South. Anybody who lived in the Solid South knows what that's all about. That was the collection of Democrats who got together and decided that they were going to run politics in the South because the Republicans had disappointed them. There's this fellow named Abraham Lincoln who freed slaves and who led the Civil War. And when he got through with that, the Democrats in town decided never again. We're taking that away from the Republicans. The Democrats are going to run the South. They got to be tremendously solid because rather than letting the freed black former slaves vote, they passed the Jim Crow laws and all of the poll tax laws and the literacy test laws and all that stuff to be sure that blacks didn't get an opportunity to vote. So without blacks being able to vote, the good Democratic Party in the South controlled everything. My notes say that they became the only game in town, and I think they did. Now, how solid a thing was that? In the South, there were, as there are everywhere else in the nation, there were Democrat and Republican primaries, and you ran in the primary. If you won the primary, you went to the general election. Because of the solid South and how solid it was, if you ran in the primary, the Democratic primary, and you won, it was over. It didn't make any difference who ran in the November general election. The Democrats had complete control of the state. Democrats always won. Not a very good story for this Democratic Party that we know and love today, but that's the story at the time. So having thought about all of that, I thought, well, maybe I'd better have a few more thoughts about this whole thing, because it's not enough to say that the Republicans are good white guys and the Democrats are good, diverse people. And so I thought about, first of all, an experience I had with my mother. I came to California in 1973, and shortly after I got here, I went to a meeting. I lived in Orange County, that was an industrial forum, and everybody at that forum, from the state senator, who at that time was Pete Wilson, on down, the Republican Pete Wilson on down in attendance. I was in a room with 1,000 people in a big hotel in Orange County. And in that room of 1,000 people, there was just me. And so I called my mother after the event and said, Mom, I just got through at a meeting in downtown Orange County, Irvine, as a matter of fact, where there were 1,000 white folks and there was just me. She said, son, you must have looked like a fly in a bowl of fireworks. And she was right. So I thought about that, but then I thought about my public school and college experience, where from the first grade through college, I attended schools that were completely segregated. That should not have happened entirely because Brown versus the board was decided while I was in school, but the schools remained completely segregated anyway. The elementary school was in my neighborhood. The high school that I went to and the junior high school that I went to, we had to ride past almost every school in town to find a black school. It was on the other side of town. Did they give us a school bus? Not at all. What they gave us was an opportunity to buy discounted tickets so we could ride the public bus, make the transfers wherever the bus stopped so we could move to our public school. So every day we rode the bus, transferred to moving towns, and then rode home. That's how well they treated us back in those days. So then I thought about my law school experience. When I was in law school at the University of Virginia, I was in a class of 250 students, which included 3 women and me. Everybody else in that class was black, and a lot of people in that class were Ivy League, really smart guys. But in the process, I found out something about the segregation and the separation that we suffered that almost hurt me badly at the law school. In 1965, I see Tim Sheridan. In 1965, the Dodgers were in a World Series against the Minnesota Twins. And in October, I was at a picnic involving all of these guys from the law school, and one of them came up to me and said, you know, Sandy Koufax, your star, is not going to be able to pitch in one game in the World Series. And I said to him, knowing nothing about Jews, because in Virginia you were either black or white, you weren't Jew, or Protestant or Catholic, you were black or you were white. So I said to him, Koufax is afraid to pitch against Yom Kippur? Kind of embarrassing. Anybody who had lived in an integrated society would have known and understood what went on with Jewish people and what Yom Kippur was all about. Then I thought about the city of Richmond in 1946, which got its first black police officer. As a matter of fact, it got 2 on the same day. Everybody in town who was black was excited about the fact that we now had a police officer, we now had a celebrity in town, we knew him by name and all that sort of thing, and we found out that he operated under some constraints. He was not allowed to stop, question, or arrest anybody in the city who was white.
Oh my God.
That was Virginia in 1946. Then we come to one of my favorite stories. This is a story simply because I remember the words so well. I had a cousin who was in the United States Marines, and he came back from Korea in approximately 52 or 53. And he decided that he was going to show me some fun. I didn't know what kind of fun he was going to show me. So he got dressed in his Marine blues and he went down to the corner drugstore, which is called People's Drugstore. And in the old days, you guys know, drugstores had soda fountains. And we sat down at the soda fountain. And this woman looked at this United States Marine from Korea with the dress blues of the United States Marines on and said, "Get off that stool." Those are words that I have never forgotten. Those were exactly the words she said. And finally they called the police and they all decided to lock us up, but they made us leave. That's how bad it was in those days. And while all of that was going on, oh, and there's one other thing. And then we had some good news because the Supreme Court decided Brown versus DuPont. And they said that separate but equal was not constitutional and that we would have to integrate schools, quote, with all deliberate speed. All deliberate speed took about 15 years. But that's what they said. In all of this, one of the questions that one would ask is, where were the Democrats when all of this was going on? Where were they to stop this? Where were they to change this? Where were they to bring things back around? I'll tell you where they were. The Democrats were leading what was called massive resistance to Brown versus DuPont. They were supporting closing public schools, supporting opening private schools, giving scholarships to white students, and letting black students fend for themselves. That was the Democratic Party back in 1954, 55, 60, and so on. A very, very mean political party. And the Republicans, because of the numbers, were nowhere to be seen. So we didn't have much help in those days. One last thought on the really bad stuff. In 1970, when I ran for city council in a city that was 84% white, and won the election, by the way. The biggest question we had to answer in that campaign was whether my campaign pictures, when posted on the telephone poles and the sign places around the city, would bear my picture. Because the question of what my picture would do to my chances was a very serious question. The answer is it did bear my picture, we won anyway. Now, things got a little bit better in the 1960 presidential campaign. You have to remember back in those days that black voters were not wedded to the Democratic Party. They were as much Republican as they were Democrat. Until Martin Luther King was arrested. And he was sentenced to spend 6 months in hard labor in a prison camp in Georgia. Yes, in Georgia. And it was 1 month before the 1960 election, and the King people contacted Republican candidate Richard Nixon, Democratic candidate John Kennedy for help. Nixon failed to respond. Kennedy got King out of jail the next day. Largely because of Republicans. Because of that, black leaders, including Martin Luther King and Ira Robinson and some of the others who were involved in the movement, came out 1 month before the election and endorsed John Kennedy, who won the election by one of the smallest majority in the history of American politics. So that little Kennedy move may have been a move that made us a lot better off than we would have been otherwise. Then a bit later, after JFK became president of the United States in 1963, he decided that he would overrule George Wallace's blocking the door at the University of Alabama and sent the National Guard to escort two black students into the school. I don't think that was particularly good news or bad news. What was good news was after that happened, he went on television and addressed the nation for the first time that any president of the United States acknowledged as concretely as he did the race part. And what he said, among other things, is this: the heart of the question is whether all Americans ought to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we're going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? The quote is just so important because presidents of the United States and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party didn't use the White House platform to talk about race relations. This was an absolute first, and really, really good news. excited about JFK. He did that in June of 1963. In November of 1963, JFK had been assassinated and our leader was gone. And now, there is this real fear that his successor, Lyndon Johnson, a race-baiting senator from the state of Texas, was going to have his way with us. I was ready to get on the bus and go to Canada or go to Africa or go somewhere to get away from Lyndon Johnson, but I made the mistake of staying. Now I think I need to leave. Because we've got this new president. Once Johnson came in office, he surprised us right away because Johnson started out by initiating the Great Society program, which was intended to eradicate poverty in the United States. He started the food stamp program. He started the Head Start program. He passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1965. He appointed Thurgood Marshall, the black attorney who argued Brown versus the board, to the Supreme Court of the United States. In my judgment, Thurgood Marshall remains the only black person who's ever served on the Supreme Court. Now, one of the consequences of all of that is that the solid South was lost to the Democrats. And because the Democrats wanted to punish Johnson for pushing all of these liberal programs. And as a result, now we have some Republicans in the South who now run it. They run it the same way that the Democrats did, but they now run as the Democrats don't. Democrats have become liberal. People like Barack Obama actually won Virginia, not once but twice, because of the change in the politics. So the character of the Democratic Party changed, and the Republicans got a little bit of a leg up, but not at the national level. Final thing. 1 week after this is Lyndon Johnson still, after the racial violence known as Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, which celebrated its 52nd anniversary yesterday, well, tomorrow, the 7th. Johnson introduced the Civil Rights Bill of 1965. And when he introduced it, he made a speech to the joint session of Congress, which, for the second time, had a president of the United States doing the right thing in the right arena. And I have to tell you, although it's a long quote, here is what he said. Every device of which human ingenuity is capable has been used to deny this right to vote. The Negro citizen may go to register only to be told that the day is wrong, or the hour is late, or the official in charge is absent. And if he persists, and if he manages to present himself to the registrar, he may be disqualified because he didn't spell his name, his middle name, or because he abbreviated a word in the application. And if he manages to fill out the application, he's given a test. The registrar of voters is the sole judge of whether he passes this test. He may be asked to recite the entire Constitution or explain the most complex provisions of state law. This is Lyndon Johnson talking on national television. And even a college degree cannot be used to prove that he can read and write. For the fact is that the only way to pass these barriers is to show a white skin. And then he says, it is the effort of American Negroes to secure for themselves the full blessings of American life. Their cause must be our cause too, because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And then Lyndon Johnson, in a joint session of Congress, said the most impressive thing I've ever heard out of a president. He said, and you guys know this, and we shall overcome. It was fabulous. So I'm still amazed and respectful of the moral courage that John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson must have had to stand in front of a predominantly white nation and say things like this and tell them they got to get their house in order. I'm just tremendously impressed by it and tremendously appreciative of it. That's one final thought that I'm real happy about, and that is in November of 2008 when Democrats actually did something I thought would only be accomplished, that wouldn't be accomplished in God's lifetime. They nominated and elected Barack Hussein Obama, President of the United States. So now I see a Democratic Party with all of its problems and disagreements as a big bowl of buttermilk with lots of flies in it, men and women, black and brown, red, yellow, straight and gay. A bowl of buttermilk that I like a lot because we've made so much progress with the Democratic progress. And so in my judgment, the Democratic Party is the best of the currently available alternatives, and that's why I'm a Democrat.